if we're thinking about it from just a pure entertainment, purpose, Chekhov's gun tells me it has to kind of be, but, we'll see. Throw up the eye! Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pharmacist Reacts to Isekai Yakkyoku, or Isekai Pharmacy. This is episode number 5, and over the past 2 episodes we've seen how our protagonist, who was a research pharmacist in his old life, has gradually become more accustomed to kind of a medieval style of medicine and healthcare system, and tries to make it better, for the common people, which is, a nice thing to do. This particular episode tends to deal with a little bit about the pharmacy economics, especially in today's society where, at least in Australia, where we have more of a socialized healthcare system where it's more equitable for people to access medications. Pharma is trying to kind of bring that kind of healthcare system to the forefront a little bit. It does also deal with the more microeconomics of pharmacy, where, in a retail pharmacy setting, how the hell do you get people to buy things, right? And often that means that you're selling things that aren't necessarily medications, like cosmetics, perfumes, the rest of it. And this particular episode is quite heavy on the cosmetics front. I personally don't have all that much experience with developing cosmetics and things like that. I'm very much heavily still on the medication side, although I would imagine that there are still plenty of kind of pharmaceutical scientists, maybe not necessarily pharmacists, but pharmaceutical scientists, material scientists, that kind of thing, that still deal heavily with how these cosmetics interact with people's skin and things like that. So it wouldn't surprise me if it is a job. I have skipped a little bit forward in this particular episode, about a quarter of the way, just because the first bit of it is kind of him talking about, people aren't coming into my pharmacy, I don't know why. And mostly it's because, as it was in medieval times up to like the 1800s, almost the 1900s, medicine was thought of as a kind of a aristocratic thing. You kind of just had to tough it out and deal with it if you were a commoner. And a lot of the complaints he's getting is that, they feel like it's too fancy, or, they shouldn't be allowed to access this kind of medication. So he's trying to break through a few stigmas, and now he's thinking about maybe I need to sell some cosmetics, things like that, to, boost sales, get people in the door, and at least maybe get some good word of mouth out amongst the aristocracy, and see if he can start influencing the populace that way. So we will get started. There is a little bit we can talk about cosmetics and things like that, because pharmaceuticals and cosmetics have a very long and twisted history with each other. So I can touch on some of that as we go through.
どうすれば彼らの来店しやすい雰囲気を出せるかが当面の課題です。
まずは貴族を相手に化粧品とか売ったらいいんじゃない？
え？
貴族の間で流行ってお値段が安ければ平民も使うようになるでしょ？
化粧品ですか。以前化粧品会社との共同研究開発でコスメ商品のテストや安全性評価を担当した経験はあるけど。妙案かもしれません。
Ooh, might be a brilliant idea. Okay, so yes, I would imagine that cosmetics companies do employ pharmaceutical companies or researchers in that case in order to test their products, right? As a pharmacist myself, I also have, knowledge about different skin preparations, things like that. More on the medical side of things, so moisturizers, things for people that have allergies or eczema, dermatitis, those kinds of things, to help them take better care of their skin and try and avoid other, skin conditions in future. So, I can totally believe that pharmacists would be in that kind of position, even though I haven't heard of any, myself. So, early cosmetics were very, the easy way to put it is harmful. A lot of them tended to use lead or mercury because they were heavier and tended to stay on the skin better, or adhere to the skin better. So normally, like when you think of, olden day kind of cosmetics, you're thinking of like powders, that kind of thing, and they tend to have a lot of lead and mercury in them. The most famous one that comes to my mind, even though it's not like medieval times, is kind of the ancient Egyptian kohl, Kohl, which is essentially just like eyeliner or black mascara. Essentially, it was used to kind of, if you look at kind of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and paintings and things like that, the black eyeliner, that's all kohl, Kohl. And essentially it was a lead containing kind of cosmetic that adhered to the skin, and they used it to kind of accentuate their eyes, I suppose. Of course, excessive lead or mercury use, it can leach through the skin and cause kidney damage, which is not great, which is why we've, kind of moved on from that. And thankfully nowadays we have better ways of applying cosmetics so that, it doesn't harm you, but it still tends to last long on the skin. And even nowadays you can get things that have, more of a sunscreen property to it. So things like titanium oxide, which is used in a lot of sunscreens, also gets used in a lot of cosmetics, just because it helps to kind of bind the cosmetic or the kind of face cream or whatever together, and also keeps it on your skin, and also helps with preventing sunburn and things like that. Although personally, I would not recommend purely a cosmetic item for sunscreen purposes, but if you can get dual purpose out of it, why not?
たものが良いでしょうか。
私ならやっぱり美肌かしらね。香りが良くて長持ちするものなら。
Also, yes, skin products tend to be the easiest to sell. Everyone's trying to look after their skin, and perfumes are really hard to, without being able to try them first, is kind of hard to market to people in a retail setting, because everyone's kind of body odor interacts differently with different perfumes. But skin products usually easy. You can feel it in your thing, in your hands and stuff like that, and you can tell whether it's a good product or not. So
最高よ。
パルマ、化粧品を扱うなら白粉だけは売るな。
父上。
もう。
Yeah, so white face powder used to have a lot of lead or mercury in it. I can't remember in the olden days. So that's probably why the dad's being like, don't use any white face powder, that kind of thing. And that's because it's really sucks. You use it too much, you end up with kidney damage. You end up with doing more damage to yourself than you really need to. So yeah.
あなたがそうおっしゃるから、私だっておしろいは使っていないのよ。
白粉を熱心にはたく婦人ほど生え死にする傾向がある。あれは医薬の道に戻るものだ。
考えすぎよ。
さすがだ。独自の観察で気づいているのか。
さすが father. Yeah, so white powder had harmful heavy metals in it. Like, yeah, exactly, white lead or mercurous chloride.
粉を口から吸い込むことでも吸収されてしまうから注意が必要だ。
昨今の巷では白い肌を得るため遮血。
Alrighty, moving on from there.
父上、母上、行ってまいります。
Seems like we have a lady that's collapsed. It could be a couple things. I'm assuming because it's to do with cosmetics. Maybe she's suffering of mercury poisoning. I doubt it. Like, there's not much you can do in that case in this kind of world if she's suffering from like heavy metal poisoning. So, I'm not sure. We'll see.
薬師様が来たぞ。道を開けろ。
こちらです。子供？
It's so funny that they keep referring to him as a pharmacist as well. Why don't you just get a doctor?
黒江お嬢様、薬師様がいらっしゃいましたわ。
Is he gonna go full Chunibyo? He's gonna throw up the eye?
顔がやたら白いな。次女と会話できてるから意識障害はなさそうだけど。
Okay, so if she's pale, still seems to be lucid, which is good. Now, in reality, you probably ask more questions rather than just pull out your super special eye. But if she's pale and she seems to be fairly lucid. That probably means that she hasn't suffered any malnutrition. It might be a very mild form of heat stroke, just because people of this period tended to wear heavy clothes, and she's an aristocrat type person. So if she's been out in the sun for a little bit too long, it not necessarily has to cause. It can, in extreme causes, cause delirium and kind of mental disturbance. But in this case, she might have stayed out in the sun too long and just brought her back in. But we don't have a lot of information to go off. There was a little bit of foreshadowing, I think, before when the dad was talking about kind of the white face powder and how ladies used to kind of let blood to get a more pale complexion. So it might be just bloodletting, if we're thinking about it from just a pure entertainment, purpose. Chekhov's gun tells me it has to kind of be bloodletting, but we'll see. Throw up the eye.
中枢神経に異常はなし、循環器呼吸器にも異常なし、少し頻脈で微熱はあるけど敗血症でもない。
It's still crazy that I can immediately examine everything.
なんだこれ。腕に何本も切り傷がある。
Yeah. So the multiple cuts on the arm. So you might especially if you go for blood tests and things like that, you'll notice that the nurses tend to cuff you kind of on the upside of on your upper arm and try and feel around for your veins, kind of around your elbow area. I can't get the camera. Yeah, around your elbow area, even though this is kind of messed up. But yeah, so kind of around your elbow area, they'll try to feel for your vein and they'll cuff above your arm just so then your heart has to pump harder back to your heart, right? So then that way they can find the veins, a lot easier because it takes more force to get past the cuff. That's the way I think about it. I might be wrong because I'm not a nurse and I don't do blood draws all the time. So any nurses out there can probably correct me, but that's the way I remember it. And then of course once they find the vein, they go straight with the needle and draw out your blood for whenever you do your blood test or whatever. These kinds of cuts on the kind of near the elbow area and on the lower arm don't surprise me if they're trying to do bloodletting or things like that. It definitely looks more surgical than it does kind of self-harm, because self-harm tends to be around the wrists because people, unfortunately, it's easier for people to see veins around their wrists than it is at their kind of elbow area, even though their elbow would probably get, if they did it correctly, would probably be more effective if, we're talking in that kind of terms. So I don't think it's self-harm. Self-harm also tends to be a lot more scratchy, not clean cuts. And while there's a lot of these cuts, they seem to be, one single slashes compared to, trying to scratch at it with a knife. Or some sort of blade, like dull blade. So I'm pretty sure this is bloodletting just because that's how the episode is structured, and that's the most logical thing to think about.
静脈切開創か。自傷？いや違う。正確に静脈を狙って切り開いてる。専門知識がある者による施術だ。つまりこれは射血の跡。
Yeah.
あなたには特に病気はありません。ただ射血が原因で体調を崩しておられます。
そんなお医者がやったのよ。
Yeah, so just because a healthcare professional says it does not mean it's the best thing to do. And this is why we always tell you to get a second opinion. Even in modern day, right? Even you can trust a doctor, but in particular circumstances, other doctors will consult, specialists and things like that. And we'll try to pull as much knowledge as we can together to be able to draw as good as a conclusion as we can make to make sure that we're making the right, we're providing the best information for you to make your best informed decision. And in this case, bloodletting's not a great idea, guys. Who the fuck knew? So Yeah, in olden times, bloodletting used to occur a lot of the time because in sickness, we previously used to think, at least in the Western side of medicine, that the body was made up of the four humors, right? I can't remember off the top of my head, but I'll put it like a chart somewhere here so you can have a look at it. And essentially, bloodletting was a way of keeping those four humors in balance or draining the bad humor more than the others, right? And it was thought if you kept these four humors in the correct balance, you'd be healthy. And if you're not, then, something's obviously wrong with your blood and you need to do other stuff. And that's all kind of ties into the whole witch, religion, all the rest of that, which I won't get into here. But bloodletting did used to be a fairly common procedure, and especially even for cosmetic reasons, bloodletting in terms of making your skin paler because you have less blood circulating, so then you have less blush, essentially. Of course, this comes with problems because you then basically induce anemia in yourself because you don't have enough blood and your bone marrow can't keep up with enough red blood cell production if you're doing it too frequently.
あなたは病気でもないのに遮血をなさるのですか？度重なる血管の切開で傷口も感染しています。
Okay, so if the wounds are infected, she would know. And she would have a fever and other things if it's become a systemic infection. So maybe if it's just a surface level infection, then maybe like you can just tell there's a little bit of pus and mucus and things like that. But if it's been repeated systemic bloodletting, she should have had more systemic effects by now. As like I said, fever, just general weakness, that kind of thing. Maybe some vomiting, diarrhea, that kind of thing. So I don't know if they've become infected. But, he's got the fancy eye, so what do I know?
お薬を出しますので、うちの店までお運びください。
思いを寄せていたお方に振られたのよ。
All right, and this is the medication he's
貧血を改善
prescribing.
するシロップ剤と感染
So a syrup to remedy your anemia and a medicine for infection. In one syrup? That's pretty whack. Maybe it's one bottle and one bag, is it? Okay, if it's one bottle, one bag, then that makes sense. The syrup is probably some form of iron. So there is iron syrups that you can buy. Especially for women in pregnancy, actually, because it's usually easier for pregnant women to be able to keep down liquid. So liquid iron, that kind of thing, to help, boost up her iron levels. And medicine for infections is, some sort of
この
antibiotic.
治療薬をお出しします。
Do they go into
朝昼夕
detail?
の3回
Take them 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening. Okay, so they didn't really go into detail, but that makes sense. Sure, 3 times a day. Don't know what they are. 1 TID,
飲んでください。それと、
1
お
TDS.
白いはおやめください。
Correct. Don't use the white powder for, as we mentioned before, tends to have mercury or lead in it. Just causes long-term kidney damage, which is not great.
それはあなたの命を縮める可能性があります。
無理よ、そんなの。
Yeah, and this lady is like, oh my god, this guy, he won't pay attention to me. He just likes all the cute girls with the white skin. So, pharmacists nowadays, I mean, we don't really help with that anymore. I mean, of course, if you talk to your pharmacist about personal issues, we will try our best to help or direct you to better resources like a therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist or things like that. But like if a lady came in and was like, oh, my boy doesn't want me anymore because I don't have white enough skin, I just be like, look, I don't know what I can do in this situation. Talk to one of my shop assistants, maybe she can help. Like I understand, I feel bad for you that maybe your object of your affections maybe isn't paying enough attention to you, but I don't have a medicine for that. I'm sorry. I can't make him fall in love with you.
私はお慕いしている方の望む姿になりたいの。ファルマ様、何とかして差し上げられないでしょうか。
美白もできて安全なファンデーションか。
So it is very lucky for him that his objective of getting people to through his door was to make cosmetics in the first place. So he's just going to make a cosmetic for this lady that's safe and, you know, does the thing she wants. So, I mean, yeah, this is something, you know, we have to do sometimes. You know, especially in retailers, you sell what is expected that you sell. And in these cases, that means cosmetics, perfume, that kind of thing. Even though they don't necessarily serve a medicinal purpose, you know, if they make people feel better about themselves, have higher self-esteem, go about their lives a little bit happier, you know, that helps keep people out of the healthcare system because, you know, they're happy. And the placebo effect and patients' self-esteem, happiness, all the rest of it does make a really big effect, as I've mentioned in previous episodes, I think, upon the strain on the healthcare system and how sick you get and things like that. So, yeah.
わかりました。クロエ様、1週間後にもう一度こちらへいらしてください。あなたに合った化粧品をご用意しておきます。
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, moving on from there, because I don't know how to prepare any cosmetics.
まずは洗顔と保湿化粧水。
Alright, so he is finished his cosmetics, face wash and moisturizer. Very good. I approve.
お肌に馴染みやすいようクリームタイプをご用意いたしました。日焼け防止効果もございます。
Yeah, so he just said it helps prevent sunburn and suntan, so he's probably put something like titanium oxide in it or something, because he can just make that shit from thin air, because he's a god. You know, what a dude. Number one pharmacist, you know. Only engages in competitive pharmacy. Anyway, yeah, so he's probably put titanium oxide or something in it. To help block the sun's rays and things like that. I shouldn't find that as funny as I do. Competitive pharmacy. Yeah, only ranked, not casual. Yeah, titanium oxide. To reflect the UV rays and things like that. The only thing I have a problem here is that he's explaining lots of modern medical things that won't be discovered for hundreds of years. So I don't get if people would really... Like, there's a very fine line, right, between, you know, magic and sufficiently advanced technology, right? Like, that's that saying or whatever. So right now, I'm kind of wondering whether he wouldn't just be burned at a stake for being, you know, a witch, essentially. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so he's trying to explain it. Chick doesn't really get it. This is, you know, another problem we have in pharmacy as well, where, you know, we're trying to counsel like patients on how best to use the medicine, and sometimes we just get lost in the weeds and use lots of jargon about, you know, all the rest of it. So it is very important that pharmacists do understand the science behind all of it and know the technical details. So that when they talk to other healthcare professionals, they can make the best decisions, but also they need to be able to dumb it down so that their patients know, you know, what they're using and things like that. So, yeah, he could have just said, look, it blocks sunlight, you won't get sunburn. Easy. Which also actually helps her to stay white, well, her skin to stay white. Because then she doesn't get a tan, she doesn't get a sunburn, that kind of thing. So helps her out too, even though the foundation should help lighten the skin and things like that.
日焼けしやすい体質と見受けしたので、その対策さえすれば十分白いお肌になれるはずなんです。
まあ、そして仕上げはこのルースパウダーです。ハケでそっとのせるように。
キラキラ。
キラキラ光って見えるわ。
セリサイトです。クロエ様のお望みの雪のような白さ。朝日に輝く新雪のようにキラキラ光る感じを出せるフィニッシュパウダーです。
すごい。 立体的。今までのおしろいとは何もかも違うわ。
お気に召
That's
しました
because he's
か？
magical.
一日の終わりにはこちらのメイク落としをお使いください。お肌の補修成分が入っています。ケアを続ければおしろいな。
This guy is really reminding me now of like L'Oreal and Pfizer combined in one or something. Like he's trying to take over the cosmetic and pharmaceutical market at the same time. Which, I mean, there have been companies in the past that do that. So, you know, Johnson and Johnson comes to mind.
でもお望み通りの肌になれますよ。
素晴らしいわ。ありがとう。これは遮血なんかより断然。
Yeah, I bet it's better than bloodletting because you don't have to bloody cut your arm all the time.
新作化粧品のお試しはいかがですか？
Ah, yes, the classic samples, pharmacy, the classic cosmetic samples. They're actually like surprisingly effective, and it's for the reasons I mentioned previously, where like if people get to try them, right, then they can see how it affects their skin and affects their odor and things like that, and then they're more likely to come in and buy stuff. But yeah, I was actually very surprised at how effective samples were at bringing people in, and I mean, I get it, right, like on a like a theoretical level, but like I just thought people would just end up taking more samples, but you know, apparently people value convenience of larger size of the containers rather than having to come into the pharmacy and ask for a sample every time.
社交界で大評判。
Alrighty, moving on from here.
化粧品か。
Okay, so I think we're nearly at the end. This is
美容
past
成
the
分をふん
ending
だんに含んで
song.
おります。
ファルマよ、直拠点の開発品はまず第一に世の元に持ってまいる。
I do want to know when they're going to start kind of the whole clinical trial process of like actually testing medications to make sure they're safe and all the rest of it before they come to market. I imagine not very soon because this one guy just makes safe and efficacious medication without having to do any tests. So, you know, maybe that'll happen, maybe not, but he runs the risk of being monopolized very easily because he's only one guy, right? So if the royal family decides that they like his stuff too much, I mean, you know, locking him up is a, you know, pretty effective way of making sure he keeps producing good shit for you.
あは、この度は失礼を。しかしこちらは正真正銘の新製品でございます。こちらの薬用リップグロスは陛下にまずお試しいただきたく。なんだこの輝きは。すごいぞ。陛下、この度。
あれらが人の寿命を縮める毒で。
The Umu action must be the voice actor for Saber Mordred with all this Umu action. The Saber from Fate Extra, whatever her name was. Was it Mordred? I can't remember. The red one. Nero? Yeah, Saber Nero. Not Mordred. Saber Nero. But yeah, I think that's about it.
国家として。お。
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So, you know, this episode was pretty interesting. It was a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I don't generally deal with cosmetics, that kind of thing, because A, pharmacists don't do that as much anymore, and B, I'm a dude. So whenever I was working at a retail pharmacy, I'd more than likely hand them off to a lady pharmacist or one of the shop assistants who knew more about the cosmetics and perfumes than I did, unless they were looking for like moisturizers or alternatives for skincare, that kind of thing, and then I'd be more likely to be able to help out with actual medical conditions rather than just trying to look pretty. But yeah, that was pretty interesting. Here, there was a little bit more background about kind of bloodletting and more of the kind of world building, that kind of thing. And I am kind of interested to see if they will dive more into the macroeconomics of his effect on this particular world, because now he has potentially got a subsidiary with all the other pharmaceutists under his wing to make sure that they can continue producing more and more cosmetics, that kind of thing. Will he start up mechanized production and induce an industrial revolution. Who knows? I mean, they have magic, so maybe they don't really need industrial revolution, but you know, we can always dream. So, yeah, I think that does it for about episode 5. If you want to see my other reactions to the rest of the series, I have them as well on my channel. And if you feel like you want a different anime, there was a pharmacy isekai a year ago called Drugstore from Another World that I also did a full series reaction on, which you can also find in this playlist. If you're more interested in kind of Japanese tourism, that kind of thing, I do have a couple of videos on that as well. And I'll have some more anime related stuff coming out soon as well. So thanks very much for watching. I'll catch you around next time.